Assassin's Creed Origins was the game that split the AC community in two. Some loved it for reinventing the series, and others hated it for straying too far from the old formula. I've just replayed it, and in today's video, I'll be looking at how it really holds up in 2025. Let's just jump straight on in. Now, Origins really came about because of the terrible buggy launch of Unity and the very disappointing sales of Syndicate. Ubisoft was essentially asking itself how it could not only restore faith in its fans and bring back its player base, but also make some big changes to keep things fresh. So in came a huge brand new RPG style of Assassin's Creed set in ancient Egypt. And personally, I think this was a great decision. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If Assassin's Creed hadn't decided to take the game in a different direction and go with a more RPG focused style, I can almost guarantee people would have been moaning that the series was getting stale. Ubisoft took a 2-year break compared to the usual 1-year release cycle, and it paid off, doubling the sales of Syndicate in just 2 weeks, with 40 million players to date. And with it, bringing a massive wave of changes from exploration to combat, stealth, parkour, and more. With our world, this was a massive deviation compared to other AC games. Previous installments tended to be set around one or several cities, and whilst AC3, Black Flag and Rogue were also much larger than their predecessors, Origins was set over the entirety of ancient Egypt, and we'd never had anything quite this big before.
That's what she said!
Michael, please.
There he is.
Please.
Mwah!
There he is. Come on.
But size aside, the setting of Egypt is quite simply breathtaking. The game gives us a world absolutely teeming with life, from sprawling deserts to wide rivers and sparkling lakes, bustling towns and cities that all feel distinct, and of course, famous landmarks like the Great Pyramids, Sphinx and more, all of them often hiding some secrets or treasure. The level of detail in Origins is staggering, and I'd found I'd often just stop to sit back and take in the view, be that a wide open landscape or a close-up of some hieroglyphics. Ubisoft's research was so thorough that the National Geographic Museum in Washington DC actually included gameplay from Origins in an exhibit about ancient Egypt. And exploration here is just fun in itself. You can zoom down massive zip lines. Bayek does however weirdly do this barehanded without so much as a wince, slide down the sides of pyramids, trek through deserts until hallucinations kick in and there are loads of different visions from swarms of bugs to ghostly animals, or wander through intricately designed cities. The day and night cycle and dynamic weather give Egypt a living, breathing quality, with wildlife like crocodiles, hippos, hyenas and lions scattered throughout, not just to admire and keep you on your toes, but also provide future crafting materials. There's plenty to discover too. We've got temples and tombs filled with puzzles, and it's super immersive to explore these with nothing more than a torch, but you're not limited to running around on foot either. You can explore using horses, camels and chariots, or even take boats down the Nile. Climbing is essentially unlimited in Origins, which in theory I'm not usually a fan of. I prefer some challenge to traversal, but in a world of constant cliffs, ruins and massive monuments, it seems to make the most sense, even if you do feel a little bit like an Egyptian Spider-Man. There is so much on offer throughout, and it's one of those games that if you wanted to, you could get lost in the world without continuing the storyline for weeks. However, despite all that, we do have a bit of a minor issue. Bayek, I found, does semi-often get stuck on small rocks or stumble around now and again, and running upstairs for whatever reason is something Origins does pretty poorly. Nothing too game-breaking, but it's actually the HUD here which slightly ruins exploration for me. Now this is something prevalent in all AC games after Origins, and it is something you could turn off if you wish, but every single interesting thing in this game is listed with a question mark. This means if you're travelling around an area you perhaps haven't visited before, you don't have the luxury of stumbling across a surprise, you know something is waiting for you because it's marked. This is a common thing in many RPG games, and it's not a huge problem, but it does mean your time in Egypt can feel like you're just heading from one marker to the next, rather than spotting something cool and being pleasantly surprised. Despite that though, Origins World is one of, if not the best setting in the entire AC series. It's beautiful, dense, detailed, and is definitely one of, if not the strongest aspect of the whole game. In fact, the only other part of the game that is also just as brilliant is its story, which we'll talk about now. For me personally, Origins has one of the best Assassin's Creed narratives. It's a standard revenge story rooted in political intrigue and historical drama, not too dissimilar to AC2, Brotherhood, AC3 or Unity, but it delivers its themes with so much emotional weight and depth. Bayek, a Magi, basically a protector of the people, is unlike most AC protagonists. He's not a charming rogue like Ezio or Arno, well he is in some ways, but he is a man driven by grief, anger and duty. Without spoiling his character-defining moments, I'll just say that very few leads in this series have experienced something quite as devastating as Bayek, and it shapes his entire journey. Abubakar Salim's performance as Bayek is exceptional, and dare I say, is the best voice actor Assassin's Creed has ever had. His delivery makes even dull moments compelling, whether he's comforting a villager through a traumatic moment, or confronting his enemies in the memory corridors after an assassination. These corridors, essentially the moments where Bayek confronts his target in a surreal, symbolic space, are some of the most well-executed cutscenes in the entire series. Just take a quick peek at this.
We'll find you. We will find you in your sleep. Sleep. I never sleep. I just wait in the shadows, and I will kill you all! Everyone who sniffed the air that day in Sewa!
I would add though that whilst the pre-rendered cutscenes are great, the in-game cutscenes to me fall a bit short. I don't want to speak too harshly here because part of me wonders whether this is down to its age, but one scene really stuck out for me where a voice actor is basically giving the performance of his life, but his NPC just looks really bland whilst saying it.
She kills them! I know it! Her hands! Oh, gods! Her hands are so bloody!
And whilst in the main storyline Bayek tends to be a little one-noted, much like in AC3's Homestead missions, in his side content of helping locals, you get to see the softer side of him. You can tell that despite dealing with the grief and revenge, Bayek truly cares for the people of Egypt. He plays with the local children, tries to save everyone possible, and always goes out of his way to do the right thing. Our plot sees us hunting members of the Order of the Ancients, the precursors to the Templars, whilst uncovering a conspiracy involving Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, and the shifting balance of power between Egypt and Rome. Aya, Bayek's wife, plays a significant role in the story too. You even get to control her in certain sequences, giving the revenge tale a dual perspective of shared grief and diverging goals. It's a shame really that she isn't included more throughout the game. In fact, there is some evidence that initially she was going to play a larger part and then was removed due to the fans' response to Evie in AC Syndicate, but she's a really cool character. She's determined like Bayek, but also takes even less shit, being really direct and straight to the point, showing her fun and softer side whenever she's around her husband. One thing that made me laugh throughout, and I'm not sure if anyone has ever said this before, is that when Bayek and Aya, whenever they're getting down to business, it's usually when they're fantasizing about killing one of these Order of the Ancient members or reminiscing about what the kill was like. It's funny, but also kind of cool that it shows them in this bloodthirsty, murderous, horny light. The main narrative also has some quite genuinely surprising twists and turns and shocking moments, and it keeps you on your toes. Often in many games I find myself switching off a little bit, but this is so much more engaging and well written than the rest of the competition. The story then concludes with the Assassin Order being established, living up to its name, AC Origins. That's not to say that it's perfect. Not only is the pacing a little off with the middle slowing down before suddenly arriving at our ending, but the side characters, aside Aya, and our final antagonist are fairly forgettable, and whilst the structure, assassinate targets to progress the plot, is familiar, the execution here feels more personal thanks to Bayek's brutal motivation. A quick touch on the modern side of things, we're introduced to a new protagonist, Layla Hassan. After AC3 and the farewell to the familiar Desmond, Ubisoft took the route of our modern day protagonist essentially being faceless and nameless, with Origins now trying to introduce a new narrative and new modern day lead. Unfortunately, Layla just isn't the most compelling protagonist. We spend very little time with her throughout the game, and whilst a few modern day missions let you play with her hidden blade, it feels more like a setup for the later games, particularly Valhalla, rather than a vital part of the modern day tale. I think overall, when you really delve into Origin's story, from the outskirts what we have is relatively average and familiar, but because our lead is so likeable, the conversations are so well written and feel real, and Abubakar Salim's performance is so brilliant, it takes what would be a 7 out of 10 story into something that is near perfect. When you couple that with the historical aspects and setting and the nod to AC lore, it is easily one of my favourite stories in the franchise and has stuck with me long after the credits rolled. And by the way guys, if you're enjoying this video so far, then a like and hitting that subscribe button goes a super long way to helping out my channel. Cheers. Now the gameplay, even more than the world in many ways, went even further with its changes than Assassin's Creed had been before. We'll start with the game's stealth, which in my opinion, overall, is just fine. Until Shadow's released, the stealth of which is excellent by the way, I never expected a massive RPG to do this particularly well, and Origins just tips below the average mark for me. We do have a few tools. You of course have your hidden blade, and you'll see the moment where Bayek loses his finger, thus establishing that tradition, which is fun. A bow, which for me is my prime way of taking out people when not straight up assassinating them. Sleep knives and smoke bombs, which I'm glad are there, although I didn't really use these that much. And a few passive mechanics like the ability to hide in bushes or whistle to lure guards. One big thing they introduced was your Eagle Senu, which you can use to scout over areas, find locations and mark enemies. You're encouraged to use this a lot throughout the game, particularly when trying to locate targets, and whilst it's a bit of a weird mechanic, how are we seeing through the eyes of a bird, it definitely is very useful at times. Stealth in Origins, whilst now and then is practical, just isn't a core aspect of the game. Because you don't have a wide variety of tools and mechanics, the world isn't built around sneaking through corridors, nor do most of the game's objectives require you to be stealthy, it's not something overly prevalent. You could take out everyone stealthily if you choose, though it'll be a challenge, but combat is usually the quicker route to take. You kind of get out the stealth what you put into it, which is good in a sense because it allows you to have different playstyles. If you're looking for an old school stealth adventure, you're not going to find it here, but for what it is, it's a fun enough experience. And with the parkour, like the stealth, it's also pretty basic. Now, I've already mentioned that Bayek can climb anything, which has its pros and cons, but from a technical perspective, coming after AC Unity and Syndicate, we definitely don't have much on offer here. We have the standard climbing, jumping and side and back ejects, but most of the time, and all of the RPG AC games suffer from this issue, the environment just doesn't cater to it. While some of the cities have some small parkour paths, this is minimal, and it doesn't feel like there are many leap of faith options either, at least without sinking on a specific spot. Most locations are easy to cross simply by running or riding a mount, and you'll likely only find yourself really using parkour when you are trying to infiltrate an area. That being said though, climbing the pyramids or leaping across temple ruins still gives you some good moments, but you can't expect the kind of flowing rooftop parkour like you might want from the earlier games. Another small issue is that Bayek can't really sprint, or he has only two speeds, walking or sprinting. In most games, your character will walk if you push your joystick slowly, run if you push it all the way, and sprint if you hold an accompanying button, but Bayek doesn't have this button. He technically does sprint, but it feels slow, so a lot of the time, even if you've got only 100 meters of distance to cover, I found myself calling my horse, which I'd also say doesn't feel particularly fast either. But the stealth and parkour for the scope of the game overall actually suit Origins pretty well. You have to accept that this is a new style of Assassin's Creed, and what's been delivered is probably right for this game. You'll have some small moments, but neither are core mechanics that you'll find yourself using too often. With the combat though, this is probably the biggest gameplay change into the series so far. This didn't just get a slight downgrade from its predecessors, this is a total overhaul. We now have a hitbox-based RPG-inspired system with light and heavy attacks, parrying, blocking, dodging, and of course a special ability depending on what weapon you are using. And there is a decent variety of weapon types, including swords, spears, heavy blunts, bows of multiple classes, each with different speeds, ranges and perks, and whilst I mainly use swords or spears, having a lot to choose from is a nice touch. Syndicate, Origin's predecessor, only had 3 weapon types that all felt super similar, and they've definitely rectified this issue. There are actually 4 different types of bows in this game as well, and whilst the Predator bow is likely the only one you'll really use for stealth, as you can take enemies out from hundreds of meters away, using the others in combat directly is great. You can use the Hunter bow for powerful shots from a mid-range distance, the Light bow to poke your enemies full of holes, and the Warrior bow to fire 5 shots at once, knocking enemies over who are charging you. The amount of weapon types in Origins is so varied, really meaning you can make your own playstyle or adapt dependent on the situation that you're facing. There are also some minor tools you can use in combat too. Aside the sleep knife and smoke bombs, we also have fire bombs and poison knives, which you could also use in stealth, but I found them best when damaging large groups or trying to take down stronger types of enemies. You can only equip one at a time though from your inventory, so if you've got a big fight on your hand, it's best to equip some firebombs, if it's a boss battle, perhaps a poison knife. There are 2 ways of fighting in this game. You either dart around dodging attacks, or you raise your shield into block mode, waiting for the enemy to attack you until you parry. It's an interesting system. Having the blocking shield mechanic is something that Odyssey, Valhalla and Shadows don't have in the same way, but it can also be a bit dull too. To me, it seems to make the most sense to go into block mode if you're overwhelmed, but if it's just a few enemies, to fight them as normal. And the key thing with this game, other than parrying, is that you really have to time your attacks. Origins combat at times can actually be pretty challenging. You've got to really pay attention to what all enemies are doing and not just attack blindly, which makes the relatively simple mechanics overall an enjoyable enough experience. I would say personally it's perhaps the weakest combat system out of the RPG Assassin's Creed games, and the lack of enemy types can make regular encounters somewhat repetitive, but for what it is, it's enjoyable and I really can't complain. We do also have mounted combat in Origins, which is a nice bonus. It's pretty simple, but is satisfying enough when clearing out a few enemies without having to dismount. The boss fights are probably the highlight for me gameplay wise, not only the scale of them, you'll find yourself battling potentially massive friggin' snakes and gods, but again they're actually quite difficult at times, and with any game I like a decent challenge and I'm glad they exist. There is even animal taming in Origins, something we haven't seen in any other Assassin's Creed games, in which upon putting an animal to sleep, you can then work your magic to tame it to your side, getting it to fight alongside you. It's a bit strange, but having some 4-legged beast on your side can feel really awesome, and it's definitely really useful as well. With most RPG games comes a skill tree, and in this it adds new abilities and perks as you level up, from better assassination damage to enhanced bow skills. Crafting and upgrading your gear is essential in Origins, from upgrading bracers and breastplates to your hidden blade. You'll find you actually spend a lot of time selling this gear too, as you really do have way too much to carry. If you neglect your upgrades and don't level up fast enough, you're going to feel it, and for me herein lies the biggest issue with the game, which you'll feel in the combat and stealth the most. Main story missions in Origins often demand a certain level, and if you try to push ahead without doing side content, you'll quickly find enemies are near impossible to kill. I like this to a certain degree. I appreciate we are encouraged to enjoy the entire game, and this is a reason to do so, but it is way too overdone in Origins, and many times I'd find I'd have to pause the main story for hours to go and help some locals and level up. Overall, the combat is simple but fun, definitely varied with all the weapon types, but you may find yourself frustrated at times because of that level scaling, forced to pause the main narrative and divert for hours and go and complete side content. This leads us nicely onto what the missions are actually like. Now, main missions in Origins follow that familiar Assassin's Creed loop. You head into a new region, knock out a few smaller objectives to gather intel, reveal your target, and then finally take them down. It's a tried and true formula, but Origins spices it up with some really memorable set pieces. There's a chariot chase where you're being hunted by a war elephant, boss battles against lots of different enemies, each of them with their own twist and style of gameplay, naval missions with Aya where you're suddenly captaining ships and firing flaming arrows, and even sequences where you step directly into Aya's shoes, although this is towards the end of the game, just shifting the perspective and changing up the gameplay. The boss fight with the snake in particular is totally unexpected and awesome. It just seems to come out of nowhere, and even though I knew it was coming, I was still grinning from ear to ear when battling this giant serpent. Origins did also take some input from Unity and Syndicate, where in many instances you're tasked with finding clues in a small area. This makes Bayek at times feel a little bit like a detective, searching through remains and scenes of crimes in order to find his next target, and it's a nice change of pace amongst moving to your next location and starting a new fight. A big highlight for me is that when you do work out your main targets, assassinating them isn't always the same. Rather than just always infiltrating an area and taking them out, they change it up, so some of them you're battling in big spectacles, or other times simply finding them amongst a crowd. One mission, where you're charged with killing a priest, you actually have to go and search for them within the temple, and as all of the priests are wearing the same outfit, work out clues as to which priest is the one you're after. It just keeps your content feeling fresh, rather than the same old of sneaking in and jumping on someone with your hidden blade. Side content is also absolutely everywhere, and it's here that a lot of the heart of the game actually lives. You'll be helping locals with everything from rescuing prisoners and recovering stolen goods to personal quests that show Bayek's softer side. Some of the most memorable side missions involves talking someone down from suicide, and one where you're simply performing leaps of faith to entertain some kids, and as I said earlier, these are similar to Connor's homestead missions from AC3, as they further flesh out Bayek as a character, but also give you a break from the usual combat and stealth of the game.
Priest, what has the boy done to deserve this?
This has nothing to do with you. Back away. The boy will get what he deserves.
Origins also introduced the bounty hunter system too, carried it into Odyssey and sort of in Valhalla, in which strong enemies, known as Phylakitai, basically roam the map in search of you. These guys, especially at the beginning of the game, can be really difficult to take down, offering you not just a tough fight but some cool rewards too, and they are a great piece of side content to keep the game interesting. Often at times I'd be nearing my objective, only to get the notification that one of these dudes was waiting for me around the corner. It keeps the experience feeling fresh and actually pretty dangerous. There is even a whole gladiator arena system too, which lasts for hours, pitting you against tons of different fighters, so once you do finish the main game, it's nice to know that there is a lot of really decent content still waiting for you. That's not to say that all of the side content is super individual and well put together, plenty of them boil down to fetch or kill objectives, but Origins manages to wrap enough character and storytelling around them so they rarely feel like filler. On top of interacting with locals, there is tons for you to come across too. We've got torchlit tombs and temple-packed puzzles, enemy forts and bandit camps to test your stealth and combat, encounters on the road, and so much more. Some of the side missions even reveal clues about your main targets too, and all of this combined just adds to the immersion and storytelling of Origins as a whole. The gameplay loop in Origins goes like this: you do a main mission, realise you're underleveled for the next one, dive into side quests to gather XP and upgrade your gear, and then return to push the story forward. At times I found this frustrating because I wanted to progress to the main story, but it did mean I was encouraged to really engage with everything the game had on offer, and as there is so much of it, and it's all pretty varied too, overall the content in Origins is pretty friggin' great. It definitely has more variety to it than any of the other Assassin's Creed RPG, and even after 100 hours in, you'll still find there is something to crack on with and enjoy. Assassin's Creed Origins, for me, is probably the most interesting game in the whole series. Yes, it dials back or changes some of the original elements, the parkour's more basic, stealth is pretty bare bones, the combat's fun but very different to what we once had before, and the level scaling can get in the way, but it works, it's fun, and it still feels like Assassin's Creed, just on a larger scale. I hadn't played Origins for about 5 years, and since then had played Odyssey, Valhalla and Shadows, so when I picked this up again, I initially felt like this was a lesser version of those games, but actually after 10 hours of replaying it, I was reminded as to why I love this game so much, and that's because the world is just so fun and immersive. Exploring tombs, climbing monuments, learning about the world is all so incredible and interesting, and Origins seriously tickles my history button, feeling so immersive and in-depth. Something which didn't really fall into those earlier categories is the music, and whilst I have zero musical talent, it just seems to work so well. Each scene or moment in the game, whether that's during a big battle or riding through the desert, is perfectly accompanied by a different score, captivating you so well. It uses sort of Egyptian melodies but blends it with modern elements, making it so atmospheric and almost bewitching at times. Origins for me is my second favourite of the AC RPG style games. Shadows just edged it out for me in terms of gameplay, but from a story perspective, nothing comes close. Bayek's journey really sticks with you. He is such a likeable protagonist, more so even than Ezio or Edward in many ways, and honestly, he deserved a sequel. The game ends with the creation of the Hidden Ones, and I'd love to see how that would have progressed, maybe even venturing to Rome given its involvement in Origin's story. Ubisoft, if you're watching, I'd be more than happy to help you figure this one out. So, is it worth playing again in 2025? Absolutely. In fact, I'd argue that if you've never played any of the RPG Assassin's Creed games before, you have to start with Origins. The world is amazing, the story is great, our lead is goated, the combat is fun, and there is so much well-created content for you to crack on with and enjoy. If you're umming and ahhing about buying it, well now is your affirmation to go out and hit that purchase button. And if you want to see where Origins landed in my full rankings of every Assassin's Creed game from worst to best, that video is on screen now. Let me know what you think of Origins, or if you haven't played it yet, tell me in the comments below. Give the video a like, subscribe for more Assassin's Creed content, and I'll catch you legends in the next one. Until then.